Hello, Charlotte culinarians. We are going to be making some basic pie dough today. Here I have an example of what we are going to be making. Just a standard basic pie dough. Pies can be used for a variety of things, and we'll talk through those as we go through. We're going to start with flour. We have 12 ounces of all-purpose flour. We're using some vegetable shortening. You can see I just have Crisco brand vegetable shortening. We're using 8 ounces, and we're using some salt and water. So very basic ingredients that we're working with today. We're going to start off by, y'all remember what this is? It's our sifter. We're going to sift our flour together. All right. I'm going to start by going ahead and getting why am I sifting this flour? Well, you know, sometimes as the flour sits in our kitchen, it can get a little heavy and dense at times. This really lightens up the dough for us and gets it real light and airy, so it helps just get any kind of tough pieces out of there. Next, I'm going to add my shortening in here. And I've already measured this out, so I'm just going to add all the rest that I have into this container to my dough. So one important thing you're going to want to remember when you're making your pie dough is that you don't want to overwork it. My pie dough can tend to get tough if I over mix it. So I want to make sure that I'm mixing it enough, but not rolling it and pressing it so much that I'm making my dough stiff. Right? So I've got a couple different kinds of tools here. So this tool, as I'm sure you already know, is called a pastry blender. And then I've also just got some basic forks here. So if you've got a pastry blender at home, you're going to use your pastry blender to cut into your flour. So just gently cutting it into the flour. Now, if you don't have one of these pastry tools at home, a pastry cutter, you can use a knife, or I'm sorry, a fork or knives, but I like to use forks and just kind of smush the, break up cutting the shortening into the flour. So you can use either tool. All right, so I'm actually going to switch back to my pastry cutter, but wanted to show you that you have the option of using both tools. Now I'm going to continue to mix this pastry, use my pastry cutter and mix it into the flour until my pieces of shortening get into almost small pea-like size pieces. All right, so I just want real small little pieces. I want to break that up. So what's going to happen are the molecules in here, when they burst as it's baking, you're going to get that nice flaky pastry crust in here. So while I'm mixing this up, let's talk for a minute about pies, right? So you look at this pie, you're like, I don't like pie. Well, that's okay if you don't like pie, but do you like eggs? Because quiche is made with a basic pie crust. You can make just a pastry crust, and you could make like a chocolate mousse pie, lemon meringue pie, of course cherry pie, apple pie, fruit pie. Today we're going to make an apple pie with our crust, and I just love apples. There's all different kinds of apples that you can buy. There's hundreds of varieties of apples, but I like to use a combination of apples and kind of getting a little sweet, tart mixture in there. Gives it a little bit more complex flavor. All right, so I've got most of my dough mixed up here. Ready to add my salt and water. Just want to get those little chunks out of there. I've got a little bit of salt. I'm actually going to dissolve that in my water first before I add it. And I'm just going to add a little bit at a time and mix it. I'm going to use my hands. So I've got a little bowl here of extra flour that I'm just going to dip my fingers into so I don't get all my hands all gucky as I mix this in here. Okay. Just gently mixing it. Again, I want to fully mix my products, but I don't want to over mix it because the dough will get tough on you. All right. I like to go every year over in Lincolnton, North Carolina. In the fall, they have an apple festival, and they have an apple pie contest where they bring all these ladies in and gentlemen as well. But you know, it's most of the grandmas competing, right? Who makes the best apple pie? But it's not too far from you here in Charlotte. So in this fall, maybe you can go over to the Apple Festival in Lincolnton and watch them make some apple pies and learn about different kinds of apples and have fun. There's music and events as well. All right, so I'm mixing this all up for my apple pie, getting my dough ready. You can see here it's getting a little crumbly. All right, so I'm just getting a nice consistency. I'm going to transfer it now from my bowl over to my table. Now you can just do this right on your kitchen counter, right on your kitchen table. I'm just using what's called a pastry mat today. I'm just going to set this bowl out of our way here, clear our space. Right. So I just have this pastry mat, and I just laid it down here on our table to work our dough. All right. See, and my hands aren't completely coated with pastry dough, but just a little bit. All right. You could take these, we have it in a big pie shell today, but you could take them and make them into little pies, make miniature little pies. You could even take this pie dough if you wanted to make it and make some fried apple pies. You could fry this dough as well. All right. So lots of applications for our pastry dough. So the next tool I'm going to use is a rolling pin. Now, this is not a baseball bat, and I don't want to hurt anybody with it, and it works really without a lot of pressure at all. I think that probably one of the greatest challenges I see is people overwork the rolling pin. So just really want to be gentle with the rolling pin. Rolling in each direction, starting from the center, back and forth, whichever way you go, kind of go the opposite each time, all right? So if you can see me okay here, I'm going to start by just rolling it forward and then back, and then diagonally and back. All right, just back and forth until I get a nice circle. I want to keep the integrity of the circle of my dough. The softer my dough is, I'm being real gentle with this rolling pin. I'm not using too much pressure, just enough pressure to stretch my dough out, but not too much that I'm smushing it. You don't want to indent into your dough. Just have some nice strokes with your rolling pin. Really be gentle with it. When I'm cleaning my rolling pin, I'm going to slide this back here on my mat a little bit. When I'm cleaning my rolling pin, I have to be extra careful, because if you can hear this, can you hear the rolling in there? Those are ball bearings that are holding this and keeping my rolling pin together. And if I get them wet, it could really mess them up and ruin my rolling pin. So be careful when you clean it that you're using a cloth, cleaning cloth, and not submerging it in the water or putting it into the dishwasher. All right. So again, gently rolling out my dough. And I always like to make sure that my dough is going to fit my pan. So I'm just going to take my pan and kind of size it up here a little bit. I think I want to stretch it out just a little bit more, and we've got that flexibility. Give it a little bit more flour here so we're not sticking. So it's a little humid today here where I'm making this apple pie. So dough is going to act differently in humid weather versus very cold weather. So if there's a lot of moisture in the air, you might need a little bit more flour, and that'll help your dough move a little bit easier for you. All right, again, I don't want to overwork my dough. I think I've got it plenty large enough here. So here comes one of the tricky parts. Couple ways to get the pie dough up off of my mat here. Because if I just go and pull it, it'll break apart. It's a very light, flaky dough. So I can do a couple of things. I'm going to use my tool here. If you don't have one of these, you could just use a spatula and kind of scoop under it. Or you could even use your rolling pin and gently roll the dough over your rolling pin. All right. And then as I bring my pan over, I just roll it right back onto my pan, right? And that way I haven't had to tear my dough apart at all. Very careful with my dough. So there's so many beautiful, beautiful designs that we can do with our pie dough. Today we're just going to do a crumble top. So I'm just going to kind of break off some of the rougher edges of my pie dough so I can get a nice size on my crust here. So just kind of get these little end pieces, get them even here, and then I'm going to tuck them under any leftovers. Just give them a little tuck. Quickly moving around. And just gently, using my fingers, kind of shape it around my pie, or around my pan, right? And I'm just gonna use my my middle finger, and kind of pinch these ends, kind of pinch them together to give them a little bit of a design. Just gently moving my pan around. Nice design for your apple pie. We're gonna top this one today with a crumble topping, which we're gonna make here in just a moment, all right? If you can make a good pie crust, it's one of the basic things that you can do at home that's so simple. So there you go. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that we have our pie crust all made and ready to go, we're going to go ahead and make our apple pie filling for our pies. Today we're using a nice Granny Smith apple, and I'm just going to use a vegetable peeler and peel my apple. Right? There is no right or wrong way on how to peel the apple. I just kind of like to do it round and round. It seems a little easiest for me. So I'm just going to move around, get all my peel off of here. So I talked to you while we were making the pie crust a little bit about apples and different types of apples. Again, hundreds of varieties of apples, but if you decided that it was June or late July and you only had fresh peaches available, you could make the same recipe with peaches. You could use strawberries, blueberries, whatever kind of fruit that you prefer. So I've got my apple peeled. I'm going to slice it in half and then in half again, so in 4 pieces. And then very carefully, I'm going to use a smaller knife and get my seeds out of here. So I want to get that seed pod out without making a mess here. So very carefully with my knife, getting those seeds out of there. And 2 more pieces. Now, if some of the skin is still on the apple, that's okay. It's going to give it some nice flavor. We want to peel most of the skin off of there, though, so it's not tough when you eat it. And that skin can be a little tough if you're chewing on it, especially after it's baked. Okay, go ahead and move these core pieces out of our way and set up for our slices. I'm using my 10-inch chef's knife to slice my apple using the bear claw method. I'm just going to slice my apple pieces. Again, if you don't have apples available to you, you can use a different type of fruit that you have or that you prefer. All right, so okay, so the next step, I'm going ahead and start cooking our apples. So I'm going to put the apples on the stove top here, and I'm going to add them into the pot. And in with our apples, we're going to add some sugar. Apple filling, pie filling has sugar, cinnamon, salt. Oh, those apples are already starting to simmer in there. A nice sizzle. I'm going to use some water. And we want these apples to cook down for us until they're nice and soft, until they're boiling. All right. I'm going to let those cook a little bit. And while those apples are cooking there, we're going to keep checking on them. We're going to go ahead and make our streusel topping for our apple pie. So the streusel topping is going to be made with butter, brown sugar, flour, and cinnamon. Okay. So I've got my butter already chopped up in my bowl. So you can do, if you have a mixer, you could use a mixer. If you want to use your hands, you can. Whatever tool you have available that you're able to mix it with, you can. All right, so I'm gonna have my butter here, mix in my flour and my brown sugar. And I'm going to grab some gloves here because I'm gonna go ahead and use my hands today to mix this streusel topping. All right, using my food service gloves. Mix this together. Kind of breaking these butter cubes up. We want them to be in nice little chunks in with our flour and brown sugar. I'm going to go back and add a little bit of my cinnamon here as well. If you like nuts, walnuts, pecans, you could add different types of nuts in here to your topping. Whatever you prefer, make it your own. All right, just getting these in nice little cubes. We're starting to get a little bit of movement in our pot there with the apples starting to cook down a little bit. Are we getting our streusel topping ready? Pies are so much fun. You can do so many different things with ice cream pies and the fruit pies and custards and whatever. Lots and lots of things for pies, lots of opportunities. Good dessert to have. I love it with ice cream or cheddar cheese sometimes. Apple pie, the little cheddar cheese. Alrighty, see our streusel topping, how it's looking here. Almost ready. All right. Tossing some out of the bowl there too, but that's all right. That happens. Alrighty. Okay, so that's mixed up pretty well there. And I'm gonna check on our apples, see how they're doing. All right, they're starting to cook down, some in there. It's gonna take a few minutes for those apples to cook, so you just have to be patient with them and let them cook down. Add our cinnamon and salt. Okay, so I made a mistake on my recipe here. I should have put some of the water in with my cornstarch, but that's gonna be okay. We're just gonna add it in here as the apples cook down a little bit. I should have mixed that in first. As long as we got all of our ingredients right, our procedure should be just fine. And I'm thinking these apples are going to take us a little bit of time to cook here. While those apples are cooking, I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way here. All right. Just going to stir up our streusel topping a little bit more. Getting those butter chunks broken up in there so we don't got too much butter in one bite. So add a lot of nice richness to the apple pie. Good. All right, I'm gonna add a little little bit of the cornstarch in here to mix these up, thicken them up a little bit. You'll see it'll start to get a little pasty. That's the cornstarch acting with the liquid. It's our thickening agent that we're using. I wish you could smell these apples on the camera. They smell wonderful with the cinnamon. Such a nice dish for fall. See, our apples are getting nice and thick and bubbly in here. That nice cornstarch added that nice thickness. I love making things with brown sugar as well. I think when you bake with brown sugar, it always adds nice texture, layers to the flavor. All right, now our apple pie filling is ready. So next I'm just gonna slide my burner over and go ahead and put it into my pie crust. I've made enough here today for a couple pies. We'll just start with one at a time. A few more in here. Beautiful apple pie. All right. Nice and thick. And now I'm going to add our streusel topping on there. Remember that butter in there is going to melt as it bakes, and then the flour and the brown sugar are going to brown up. So you'll have a nice caramelized flavor in there. Okay. And that is it for our apple pie. We're going to take our apple pie, we're going to bake it in the oven for about 45 minutes until it's nice and bubbly. All right. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.